Toussaint. The first thing Celine noticed was the sound, or rather, the absence of it. The moment her feet sank into the plush carpet at the top of the stairs, the noise from below dropped to a hush, as if it were being muffled, like a heavy blanket had been drawn over the entire second floor, warding away the possibility of eavesdroppers. But that was impossible. How could anyone manage such a thing? Celine let her vision slowly adjust to the darkness. Dim lighting glowed around a large rectangular chamber replete with gleaming wooden tables. Surrounding the tables stood shadowy figures adorned in silks and sparkling gemstones, cut crystal glasses flashing with each of their movements. A faint breeze tempered the air, fending off the rising heat from below. The floors and paneled walls were stained a dark mahogany, polished to resemble the surface of a black mirror. Silk drapes of a costly indigo hue, trimmed with golden tassels, framed with every arched window. A long chaise sat empty in the chamber's center, like a throne meant for an empress or a goddess of old. That same sense of a blurred reality, of a sight gone hazy along its edges, enveloped the space. Punctuating the din was the occasional clatter of ivory dice across felted base, the flutter of glossy cards being shuffled and sorted, the occasional muted cheer. "It's a gambling hell," Pippa said, her tone a mixture of unease and anticipation. Celine tilted her head. It was, and it wasn't. She couldn't ignore the feeling that she was peering at a beautiful mask, some kind of artful illusion, that if she shook her head just so, her vision would clear, leaving behind nothing but truth. Was this place the court the two young women had mentioned in Jackson Square that afternoon? Could its bejeweled patrons be responsible for such a sordid crime? At first glance, it did not appear so, but first impressions were known to be deceiving. Whenever Celine had heard talk of gambling hells, they'd been portrayed as dens of iniquity. Powerful men sloshed with drink, wasting away fortunes on the single roll of a dice. Powdered light skirts plying their scented wares. Bared skin and spilled liquor, lush velvet and cool ivory. Wealth at the height of its debauchery. The scene before Celine could not appear more civilized. Everywhere she looked, dazzling women and elegant men of all skin colors congregated as seeming equals, as if this was not an unusual sight at all. Just then, a cry of triumph rose into the darkness to their right, just beyond a game of faro. The sound drew Celine toward an oval table of lustrous burlwood, the sides around it unspooling like bolts of fabric, captivating her with possibility. Roulette. She'd heard of this game before, but never had occasion to play it. "Celine?" From behind her, Pippa took hold of her hand beseechingly. Celine halted in her tracks and eyed her friend over her shoulder. "What are you doing?" Pippa asked quietly. The question emboldened Celine, granted her a sense of purpose. Perhaps it was the golden glow of the gas lamps, or the heady scent of spices mixed with smoldering cigars. Whatever it was, she did not want to hide among the wavering shadows. She wanted to soar. "I'm playing roulette," Celine replied, her voice filled with conviction. Shock fluttered across Pippa's features. "What?" Celine was tired of doing nothing but watching. Tired of wearing her own mask and being a mere observer to life. "You wanted to know who I really am?" She bit her lower lip. "I'm a girl who'd rather experience life than watch it pass by from my window." Pippa exhaled slowly, then nodded as she released Celine's hand. Like a moth to a flickering flame, Celine glided toward the amber light surrounding the roulette table. She hovered along the edges, her skin tingling with awareness. A croupier swiped away a stack of tortoiseshell chips, presenting them to the recent winner. He waited for the players to place their new bets, then held a small ivory ball aloft before spinning a wheel of numbers in one direction and dropping the ball in the other. The tick-tick-tick of the roulette wheel grew louder and faster, until each sound blended into the next. "Rousses!" the croupier called out when the ivory ball landed in a red square labeled 16. Across the table, a trio of companions, two women with a dark skin and a man with a burnished complexion, grumbled in French to each other before reaching to place another bet. The rings gilding both women's fingers were immense, jagged pieces of raw stone set in pure gold. Celine searched for a set of discarded dice, a way to join the game despite her lack of fortune. Her gaze caught on the faces of the trio, and a strange realization gripped her stomach. They were all extraordinarily attractive. Their skin seemed to glimmer beneath the warmth of the newfangled electrical lantern hanging overhead, the centers of their eyes filled with lambent light. When they moved, the air around them shifted like smoke. Celine blinked as if something had floated across her vision, her lashes fluttering to clear her sight, her lips parting ever so slightly. "Lovely," a male voice murmured from her left, his thick drawl catching her attention. "Pardon?" Celine replied, turning his way. "You could be my good luck charm, my beauty." The young man's elbow brushed her arm as he leaned in closer, his clean-shaven features sly. He, too, was inexplicably handsome, his face like that of an angel, his expression decidedly at odds with the cherubic curls atop his brow. Again, Celine was struck by how clear his eyes were, how the blue, ringing their dark centers, seemed inordinately intense. Inhuman. The thought startled Celine. She banished it with a toss of her head, restoring her senses so that she wouldn't appear to be a simpleton. "I'd rather be my own good luck charm, sir." Squaring her shoulders, she met his appreciative stare. He rolled a set of dice between his fingers, his angelic curls falling across his forehead. "I'd wager you've never played roulette." "You'd be wagering incorrectly then," Celine lied. She held out her hand for the dice. "I might be the best roulette player you've ever met." He laughed. "I can taste your deceit, my lovely little liar." He whispered, "What?" Celine dropped her hand, stepping back, disoriented by his words. "It's sweet on my tongue." Again, Celine took a small step back, almost colliding with Pippa. "Boone!" A feminine voice warned from the shadows. "Don't be a beast. You'd been warned already." The young man put both hands in the air in a gesture of surrender and pulled away the following instant, but not before offering Celine a wink. "Fantastique!" The same feminine voice exclaimed from behind Pippa and Celine, as if nothing of import had occurred. "I didn't think you'd actually come." The slender silhouette lurking in a fall of shadow shifted into the light. Celine's mouth dropped open. "Of course, I hoped you would," Odette continued, her teeth flashing in a smile as she lifted her glass of red wine in salute. "But I didn't place a bet on the outcome." If the girl had not spoken first, Celine never would have recognized her. Gone were the dainty, demure garments from earlier in the day. The only familiar embellishment was the ivory cameo with its halo of blood-red rubies. Odette was dressed as a gentleman. Her trousers were made of supple buckskin, and her shirt, with its ballooned sleeves, was stark white, covered by an elaborate waistcoat of a pale green jacquard. The chain of a large gold pocket watch hung across the front of Odette's vest, but the pièce de résistance had to be her intricately tied silk cravat, pinned in its center by the ivory cameo. Her brown hair had been slicked back from her face and gathered at the nape of her neck in a simple knot. A slow smile unfurled across Odette's face at their stunned silence. She swirled her wine knowingly. "Why, you're wearing trousers!" Pippa remarked a moment later, her eyes enormous. "I find it incredibly freeing." Odette moved forward, resting one of her gloved hands in her pocket. "Some days I adore wearing corsets and bustles and layers of silk, but sometimes it pays to wear pants." Though Celine was still rendered speechless by the sight, A sense of delight wound through her. The grin lingering on the edges of her lips threatened to bloom. How wonderful! Celine cleared her throat. Of course we came, she began as though nothing were amiss. I said I would, and I don't enjoy going back on my word. Celine shifted beside Odette, studying the lovely girl's outfit with a practiced eye. Forgive me, but there's a stain beside your cravat. She nodded at Odette's shirt, where the tiniest drop of red wine, or perhaps rouge, had seeped onto the otherwise pristine cloth. Odette glanced downward, tugging at her collar with a gloved finger. Merde, she cursed under her breath. And I thought I had been so careful. Both rouge and red wine are easy to remove with a bit of white wine or tonic water, Celine offered. Otherwise, you look impeccable. Truly. Odette wrinkled her nose, no doubt pleased to hear the compliment. Celine nodded. A jacquard waistcoat is an excellent choice for someone with your coloring, and the tailoring looks flawless, though I would have selected a French seam to finish the edges instead of a standard backstitch. Are French seams better? Odette asked as she set her wine on a nearby table. Of course. Celine didn't blink. They're French. Odette laughed. You're simply delightful, mon ami. Celine almost smiled alongside Odette, but something stopped her, bade her to keep her distance, at least for the time being. In the past, being too trusting of others had not done her any favors. I've never seen a knot like that. She nodded toward Odette's cravat. It's a mail coach knot from the earlier part of this century. Odette's eyes gleamed pale gold. I don't think that men of the Regency era had the best sense of fashion, don't you? Celine thought a moment. Part of me is inclined to agree. She paused. Though I'll admit I've never fancied the top hat. Men have no need of the added height. They lord over everything enough as it is. Odette hummed in agreement. What kind of hat would you pair with this ensemble? She asked. An Eton cap? A bowler? Frankly, I'd prefer no hat at all, but I know it's simply not done. If you were out during the day, I would recommend a straw hat with a thick band. The weather here becomes it. So then, a Panama hat. Odette tapped an index finger against her chin. Celine frowned. No, something else. Something that did not remind her of Sebastian Saint-Germain. Celine swallowed, wondering why her thoughts had hearkened to that particular style in that particular instant. It had never struck her as memorable before. When Celine glanced at Pippa, she noticed her friend studying her. Pippa's blonde head angled to one side, as though she'd heard the lie buried deep in Celine's musings. Discomfited by the notion, Celine decided to shift tack. Is there a place we could begin taking your measurements? She asked Odette. Odette rested her arms akimbo and cocked her head to one side. I'm fine taking measurements here as long as you don't mind. It was almost as if she had issued a challenge. Such a thing simply wasn't done. But then again, Odette appeared to enjoy bucking convention. Why should this occasion prove any different? Her features the portrait of apathy. Celine reached inside the pocket of her petticoat and extracted a length of measuring ribbon. She refused to be outmatched or intimidated, even if Odette did wear trousers. While Celine worked to measure Odette's torso, she peered through a parting in the crowd, catching a glimpse of an ongoing chess match. Neither of the players moved for a span of several breaths, their eyes riveted on the black and white board. Then the white king fell without ever being touched. The next instant, the entire chess set rearranged itself on its own, the pieces whisking across the checkered surface in a whirl, as the victor reached over to shake his opponent's hand, a smile curving up his face. What? Pippa stammered. What happened? Celine stared, her expression one of disbelief. More importantly, how? You needn't look so surprised, Odette said with a grin. They're simply illusions performed by those with the skill. Pippa glanced at Odette, a brow arched in question. You mean magic? Of a sort, Odette nodded. This is a place in which students of the occult, she searched for the word, her hands turning through the air, gather, like a gambling hell for magicians? Doubt crossed Celine's face as she resumed measuring Odette's arms and shoulders. I wouldn't call us magicians, Odette replied. We prefer to be called illusionists or mentalists. Pippa nodded. I saw a performance by a mentalist once, just outside of London. He turned water into ink and transformed a bouquet of lilies into a bevy of doves. She paused. Do you members also give performances like that? Some of us do. Odette raised a shoulder, eliciting a wordless rebuke from Celine. But most of us simply choose to meet here in safety to hone our craft. She paused. It's a blessing we've been provided with such a space. There was a time before when things were not quite so. A shadow darkened Odette's countenance as her voice faded into nothingness. Then she grinned brightly. Celine took in a careful breath while she worked, her doubts growing. Something about the girl's explanation troubled her. It felt familiar, the kind of explanation Celine had been wont to give as of late, a skeleton of the truth. What kind of mentalist are you? She asked, her tone nonchalant. One who divines the future, Odette said matter-of-factly. The ancient called it stargazing, but the mystics in the quarter refer to us as soothsayers. Pippa's rosebud lips fell open. Then you already know everything that will happen? Everything I will do or say? She glanced about with obvious discomfort. Even what I might be thinking or feeling? Odette shook her head. I know what may happen depending on the choices you make. Just by... Pippa swallowed. Looking at me? No. Physical contact is necessary for me to divine things with any measure of clarity. During this exchange, Celine had kept silent for fear she would speak out of turn. She paused to take note of the final measurements, but disbelief flared hot in her veins when she recalled how Boone had claimed to taste the flavor of her lies. Such things are not possible, her mind screamed, demanding attention. Her heart, however, knew better. Celine could not deny she'd been in the presence of something otherworldly tonight. Here at Jock. Moreover, she recalled her first encounter with Odette this afternoon. How Odette's gaze had widened infinitesimally when Celine had taken her hand. The soothsayer had seen something, even in that briefest of interactions. Captivated by the prospect of such knowledge, of such power, Celine discarded the measuring ribbon, her pencil dropping from her lips. She knew it was a risk, but she simply had to know if Odette had uncovered any of her secrets. What did you see? Pippa turned toward her, confused by the question. Odette met Celine's gaze, her expression knowing. What do you mean? Her voice sounded deceptively innocent. This afternoon, Celine continued without batting an eye. When you took my hand, what did you see? Odette's smile turned fierce. I only caught flashes of possibility. The lace obstructed my view. She held up a gloved hand. Annoying but necessary. It's easy to lose sight of what's real when you're lost in the stars. Celine stood taller, then held out her hand, her gaze steady, determined to learn whether or not Odette possessed any damaging information. Please, tell me what you see. I'd like to know. As she had earlier today, Odette canted her head in contemplation. Are you quite certain, mon ami? Knowing what might happen is not the same as preventing it from happening. Celine nodded. I'm certain. Odette removed the kidskin glove on her right hand. Without hesitation, she wrapped her cool fingers around Celine's palm and closed her eyes. Her smile softened. La dompto de bête, she murmured after a moment. Her eyes flashed open, laughter tinging her tone. Je le savais! She congratulated herself. The tamer of beasts. Celine translated, her expression one of puzzlement. I don't understand. Odette did not answer. Her lips began to purse as if she'd consumed something sour. She swallowed carefully, her eyes squeezing shut once more. Whatever she saw now caused her unmistakable consternation. Pippa gnawed at her lower lip. Unease trickled down Celine's spine like a bead of slowly dripping sweat. She gripped Odette's hand tightly, noticing how much warmer her skin felt with each passing second. "What?" she whispered. "What is it?" All at once, Odette pulled away, yanking her palm from Celine's grasp. Her brown eyes flickered open, their darkened centers large, shimmering, out of focus. I couldn't," she trailed off, momentarily disoriented. Then she straightened like a soldier and shot Celine a dazzling smile. "I'm sorry, mon ami, but portions of your future were too murky for me to divine." Celine did not believe her. "What does that mean?" Odette shrugged. "It means the course of your life is yet to be plotted." Her laughter resembled bubbles of champagne, light, frivolous, full of air. "But don't fret. We can try again soon, I promise." Celine swallowed her retort. Odette's brand of magic was not as impressive or as helpful as she'd hoped it would be. It was also possible the girl was deliberately concealing what she'd seen. Neither option sat well with Celine, but it would be impolite to pursue the matter further in public. As though nothing had transpired, Odette shifted her attention to Pippa. Her ungloved hand held out before her. "Would you care to try?" Pippa took a step back. "Please don't be offended, but I'd rather my future remain a surprise." Another round of airy laughter burst from Odette's lips. "Smart girl!" "But," Pippa said, her features knitting with confusion, "I am curious about how it works. Is it a skill with which you are born, or one you must cultivate?" Odette tilted her head from side to side, wordlessly balancing her thoughts like weights on a scale. Before she responded, she donned her glove once more. "Many of the women in my family were gifted with the second sight. This place has given me a chance to cultivate this gift without judgment or expectation. For those like me, it's the only safe haven we've ever had." Her grin turned sad before she brightened the very next instant. "Truly, this is a place unlike any other." "Casimir called it Le Coeur de Lion," Celine said. "The heart of a lion," Pippa attempted to translate. "The court of the lions," Celine corrected in a kind voice. Pippa's gaze widened in understanding. Undoubtedly arriving at the same conclusion Celine herself had come to not long ago. That, yet again, Celine was responsible for dragging her friend deeper through a field of razor-sharp diamonds. Perhaps it was simply her fate to be a portent of doom. Odette rolled her eyes. "That's not Casimir's doing, that's Bastian's. Honestly, that boy could sell a snowball to a penguin." She snickered. "You would never suspect how dramatic he truly is." Her features turned rueful. "Ah, but if she heard me say that, he would stare at me with those dagger eyes of his until I apologized. Really, men are such infants." Distracted by her worries, it took a moment for Celine to register Odette's words. Her blood turned cold. "Bastien, are you referring to Sébastien Saint-Germain?" Odette's eyes went wide. "Yes, that's him." "Un rey du monde, n'est-ce pas?" She sniffed. "At least he's a welcome sight for the eyes. Have you ever seen a more handsome devil?" "No," Celine admitted. "And fortunately, neither has he." "Parfait! Simplement parfait!" Odette clapped her hands, her laughter lilting into the coffered ceiling. Then she resumed chattering without pausing for breath. Somewhere high above the clouds, or deep below in a fiery pit, an otherworldly creature must be having a grand time at Celine's expense. Her shoulders fell forward, her lips thinning into a line as the words continued flowing from Odette's lips like wine at a bacchanalia. Bastien's uncle owns this entire building as well as several properties in the Vieux Carré, Odette said. Of course you've heard of Le Comte de Saint-Germain. Rich as Croesus and charming as sin, Bastien is his sole heir. A fact that hasn't gone unnoticed by the debutantes of our fair city, despite the concern many in society have with regard to his parentage. Her laughter became mischievous, a sly flutter of sound. I'd wager money solves most problems, no? She winked. Though I myself speak only 3 languages, the Count has mastered 9 and can quote entire swaths of scripture on a whim. He's also an immense fan of the... She stopped short when she noticed the glazed look on Celine's face. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Odette leaned conspiratorially toward Pippa, who stood to one side, her fingers threading and unthreading through each other. Don't believe all the nasty rumors. Bastien's uncle is a gem. After Bastien's parents died, he took him in as a boy and cared for him like his own. Celine cleared her throat, bewildered by the onslaught of information. This is the first I've heard of the Count. And I was only introduced to his nephew this evening. Odette tilted her head. The Count is not in the city at present, but I suspect Bastien should arrive at any moment. She began scanning the plush carpet, her gaze weaving around the chair legs. In any case, you should be on the lookout for Toussaint. What? Celine refrained from shifting backward. We should be looking for something on the floor? After witnessing chess pieces offer their own surrender. Celine did not want to be caught unawares by naughty parlor tables or stools with errant senses of humor. Don't be alarmed, it's really nothing at all. Odette gestured once more with her hands, a reaction Celine had come to associate with agitation. Toussaint is Bastien's Burmese python. She rushed through her next words. Really, he's completely harmless. The poor angel adores his rest and wouldn't hurt a mouse. She grimaced and bit her lip. Zut alors. I meant figuratively, of course. Odette brightened. Just wait. Before you know it, you'll all be the best of friends. It took a moment for her explanation to register, disjointed as it was. Bastien's Burmese python. Bastien's giant snake. Though the serpent in question had yet to make an appearance, Pippa stifled a small shriek and jumped backward, scrambling for a chair or something upon which to stand. Celine remained rooted to one spot, a familiar rush coursing through her veins. Odette cast them a rueful glance. Occasionally, Toussaint does like to wrap himself around anything warm, but please know you have nothing to fear. I only mentioned him because if you don't know to look for him, he can be a bit disconcerting. A snake? Pippa squeaked, looking for all the world as if she wanted to melt into the paneled wall at her back. What kind of a person is a pet snake? Lucifer, Celine said in a flat voice. Lucifer would have a pet snake. A trill of laughter burst from Odette's lips as she reached for her glass of wine. Ha! You simply must tell me what happened when you were introduced this evening. How delicious! Celine sucked in her cheeks to marshal her retort. Pippa's blue eyes darted across the floor while she gnawed on her lower lip, her fingers toying with the golden cross around her neck. We encountered Mr. Saint-Germain on our way here. He wasn't... She hesitated. As gracious as he should have been. I'm unsurprised to hear that, Odette said. Bastien is like a character from a childhood nursery rhyme. When he's good, he's very, very good. When he's bad, well, I'm sure you can finish the rest. Celine certainly could, but she refused to waste more time contemplating that wretched boy and his ridiculous pet snake. It would take effort. But Celine intended to put a swift end to whatever worrisome interest this beautiful boy had managed to wake in her. In truth, she didn't understand it at all. They'd barely spent less than a moment in each other's presence, and a handsome face was not enough to distract her from his many misdeeds. Before the night was through, Celine intended to have a firm rein on her emotions. Nothing good ever came from letting them run amok. Her gaze settled on a painting in a gilt frame across the room. She let her sight distort until its edges glowed molten gold. Celine hated how much her notice of a boy like Bastien brought to light how broken she was. In one short evening, he'd become a proverbial thorn in Celine's side, a reminder that something inside her was not right. Perhaps that was it. Perhaps it wasn't a fascination with him at all. Perhaps it was the allure of the creature that lurked within her. Not too long ago, that creature had granted her immense power over a tormentor and a freedom over her life. But it had also made her a murderess. Celine's expression hardened. She would put an end to all of it immediately. It would have worked. Later, Celine would swear she'd been on the cusp of victory. Intent on shoving anything related to Sébastien Saint-Germain deep into a dark abyss, to make him disappear forever. All would have gone to plan, if not for the high-pitched scream that suddenly tore through the room.